We don't have to try any harder. We don't need to fight anymore. We don't have to try any harder, no.
Hey, Jacob.
Hi, Scott.
Oh, man. So fingers crossed for those of
Fingers
you
crossed.
listening and tried to listen to episode 47 last week. We heard from many of you that it cuts out, my audio cuts out completely after about 10 minutes. So sorry about that. We've been having some issues lately with this broadcaster that has normally been flawless.
Yeah.
So we're hopeful that today all will be well with what we record and you'll have a full episode to listen to.
And that was not a some sort of sick trick to just see who was listening, to have it cut out half. I couldn't believe how many notes and comments I got. Hey, what happened here?
I know. So we're going to we're going to talk about what we talked about in the last episode because we really loved the last episode and we were excited about it. But before we dive into that, how are you, brother?
Oh, I'm good. It's a beautiful Saturday in Boise, and we've had this long. I don't know how it's been for you in Santa Fe, but we haven't actually had any frosts here in the valley yet. So it's just been this long. Every day gets to around 75 or 80, and at night it cools down to the 40s, but not quite cold. So our trees haven't suddenly changed; they're just gradually changing, and it's just been this long, sort of blissful, what they used to call Indian summer. I'm not sure what you call it now.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We're having a similar thing happen here.
Yeah.
This next week it's supposed to get a bit chillier. We might freeze for the first time, so it might happen. But it's been gorgeous, like unbelievably gorgeous.
I always feel like I'm cheating on summer when I say that fall is my favorite season, because I love summer so much.
Yeah.
But my God, fall, whenever it's fall, I just fall into, poetry and feeling and color and sensuousness in ways that no other season quite does for me.
Oh, beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
So
Scott, we had the remark, and I'm so excited to redo our abundance conversation. And I feel like it's so important also.
me too.
And not just important, like we need to teach other people. I've experienced the importance in my own life.
Yeah.
And watched things shift so dramatically in the last few years. And it's interesting how deep the roots of scarcity and scarcity thinking and scarcity living go, not just in the financial areas either, just in life in general, whether it's love or self-esteem or creativity or anything. It's just interesting how deep that principle of scarcity, how far those roots reach in life. So I'm
In
excited
all
about sharing.
areas. Yeah, in all areas. I mean, if you struggle to self-love, there's scarcity there. If you struggle with money, there's scarcity. If you struggle with creativity. And I look at the places in my life where I'm still working with these things in all areas, honestly. And when I really reflect on what's going on for me, I'm like, it's scarcity mentality again, rearing its head for any number of reasons. So our last episode, we really focused on abundance, and you want to just dive in?
I do, but before I do that, I just want to take a moment, Scott, and say next week, is it next week or the following week, we're doing a special breathwork session with you for everyone. I'll make sure there's a link to that in the show notes.
Sunday the 23rd.
Yeah, Sunday the 23rd. Yeah, a week from tomorrow. I'm so excited about that. I was already excited to offer it. And the one that we're talking about right now on the 23rd is open to everyone. It's no cost to you. The Institute for Creative Living has already paid Scott for it. So I'm just so thrilled to share this, because this last week, Scott did one of the same sessions for my family. We did a private group, and a bunch of us gathered in Nate's living room, and Emily joined from San Francisco. And Scott, I mean, I've had breathwork experiences before, and this was so... every time it's definitely a medicine journey, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, no question. And learning what it's doing in the brain, the nervous system, and all that stuff. I just love that. But feeling this collective group experience, and different people having different versions of their own journeys, but having us together, I just got really emotional, especially toward the end, just with so much gratitude that my family, it has grown to a point where they can experience these kind of things together. Like that would have been impossible 10 years, 5 years ago. They would have scoffed, like, what are you talking
Mhm.
about? And now we're all laying on the floor on little rugs, breathing with Scott's voice in the background, weeping and stuff. It's a miracle. It's amazing.
That's so beautiful. It was so beautiful for me. One, I've heard so much about different family members, so to actually get to connect with them in that way was lovely. And I know what you're saying, Jacob. You know, my three sisters visited me in April, and I guided them through a couple breathwork sessions. And to see my sisters laid out before me, embracing this thing that for each of them, it was kind of like, what is this? It's weird. And then they did it. They're like, what is this? You know, we want more. But I get it. It's profound to
Yeah.
be in a healing space with family members, especially if that's not where you came from or what was a part of the family at one point. So it was a great gift for me. Thank you so much. I loved that evening.
I just love that you're doing it, Scott. And I know we've talked about it on the show, but to have a fresh experience of it with you as the guide, and then to know that I get to share that with so many other people. It is a for anyone who's ever heard us talk about medicine journeys, plant medicine, maybe for whatever reason that doesn't call your name. This is an experience that you can generate in your own self, body, mind, spirit, that is as powerful as other medicine journeys. It is a medicine journey.
Yes, just using the breath. It's
Yeah,
extraordinary.
it's
Yeah,
amazing.
awesome.
So
Woohoo!
excited about sharing this. I mean,
I am so
genuinely, holy
excited for
shit.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait for next weekend too. It's thrilling for me every time because every time people are blown away. Really.
I love that. Yeah. And I love how, in even in the room the other night, and I'm not talking out of school, but there, varying levels of resistance to it, or
Yeah,
skepticism about it. And then, it's just, okay, I'll do this, I'll follow along. And then by the end, people are like, what happened?
totally. It's so fun. It's like the best party trick, breath work. It just pays off like 9.9 out of 10 times. People are like, what the fuck just happened?
I always think it's funny now that I've done it several times. I always think it's funny that about 5 minutes in or 6 minutes in, just breathing and making sure the cadence and all that. Um, at some point, and this is very similar to plant medicine for me too, Scott, at some point, there's usually this crossover where inside of my mind, it's like, oh, maybe this is all that this one's going to be for me. Just feeling really, really relaxed and
Totally.
good. And it's like, whenever that thought comes up, the next 30 seconds, things are going to change.
Totally. I remember in an ayahuasca journey, um, however many months ago, feeling, or maybe it was, yeah, I think it was ayahuasca, and feeling like, oh, I'm not going to purge this time. And I always purge fairly aggressively, let's say, when I use ayahuasca,
Yeah.
vomiting, like, and I'm like, yeah, and I'm like, and then what I was telling myself is, it's like, oh, I'm in harmony with the mother and I have control over this now. Like
Oh,
I can, yeah, literally, that's what I said. It's like, I feel like I finally have
yeah.
control over whether or not I purge. And this time I'm choosing not to, and like 15 minutes later, completely doubled over, vomiting my everything out. And it's like, yeah, I don't have control. I don't have control when this plan is in me. The plan is definitely doing what the plan needs to do, and that is beyond my control.
The mother is going to take you where you need to go.
Exactly, exactly. So
Uh,
abundance.
yeah, and I would love, last time we did this, you set it up with a series of questions for me, and I'm delighted to go into some of those things as they come up naturally. But I would love to hear, Scott, from your perspective. When did you notice as a child or a young person, when did you notice scarcity, whether it was financial or emotional connection or when did you start noticing that you weren't getting what really everything that you needed?
Well, I mean, scarcity in terms of, I would say, in terms of love from my father I wasn't getting any fathering or love, prior to his death when I was
Mhm.
14. But scarcity in terms of, we were fed, we were taken care of. I mean, we weren't neglected in that way. There was always dinner.
Mhm.
There was always food in the house. But my father was a gambling addict.
Mhm.
So I don't remember exactly how aware of this I was as a child, but I know that I remember my family talking about it. So I can't remember exactly if I was really tuning in to the degree to which, from a financial perspective, we were often living by the whims of whether my father was winning or losing.
Mhm.
So one week, there was a lot of money all of a sudden, and then there wasn't much money all of a sudden. There was the tension in the
Mhm.
household. But again, I don't know how attuned I was into this, but as an adult talking with my siblings about it and hearing them talk about watching certain games on the TV, because he would gamble on all the football games and baseball games, and the tension in the house if the team, like maybe your home team is the one you're rooting for, but knowing that our father had actually bet on the other team and you couldn't ever cheer. You had to be really quiet if your home team was winning because that meant our father was losing. And in understanding that when he's losing, money is big, a lot of money is leaving the house,
Mhm.
and that there's so much scarcity built into that, into the idea that you could be without at any time,
Right.
um, or that you could be like flowing with money at any time, in that kind of roller coaster energetically. And I
Mhm.
know that that's contributed to my relationship with money. Obviously, even if I was young and even if I wasn't totally tapped in, we're energetically tapping into that, and we're riding that roller coaster of anxiety and abundance, anxiety and abundance. So, what
Right.
about you? Like, what was your story around abundance as a kid?
Well, I love how you set that up, and I want to be really clear that what we're talking about as we begin talking more and more about abundance is it'll have to do with money, because that is one of the areas that seems to be an area of a lot of pain for a lot of people, and has
Yeah.
been for me in my life as well. But at the core of every one of these roots of scarcity, at the very core of that is the belief that I am not enough.
Hmm.
Who I
Yeah.
really am is not enough. It's not enough to attract the love that I need, whether that's from a parent or a friend or a sibling or a
Yeah.
partner. I'm not enough. I'm not enough for this life that I'm living. Um, I don't have enough. So I just want to, at a very sort of core principle level, if we can understand that what we're talking about and will develop during today's episode is a process of getting to that core over time,
Yeah.
and not with some perfectionistic goal of it, just being aware of the core and little by little loving ourselves more and more and more into a sense of abundance. That's how I see it. And I'd love to hear any other additions or reflections you have on that, Scott.
No, I think that was beautifully stated. And for me, when I hear you say that, where I come to, and what we talked about a lot last week was, for me, when I feel in alignment with God, with spirit, with source energy, the energy in all things, when I am in that alignment, there's no scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
Because in that alignment, and again, if you're somebody who, one, I really invite people who might get triggered by words like God or source or spirit to get over it. Like, I mean that genuinely. Like, don't allow yourself to shut down because these words don't work for you, or even the energy of what I'm speaking about doesn't work for you. If the whole notion of God doesn't work for you, think about nature, think about the natural world. The Whatever energy is alive in the trees, whatever energy is alive in the oceans, in the planets, whatever energy is alive in the creation of that, that's what I'm speaking to. I believe that that energy is alive within us. And I get so much strength from that understanding. So when I'm in my heart and soul and feeling connected to that energy, I have all the love I need for myself. There's no scarcity of love. When I'm connecting to that energy, there's no scarcity of creativity. When I'm connecting to that energy, even if there's what I would call maybe scarcity in my bank account, there's no scarcity in my relationship to money and to what's in my bank account. There's no belief that this is the end all be all for me, or that what's in my bank account ultimately defines me, or even that if what's in my bank account is stressful to my mind because there's not a lot of money there, that there's a place in me that is still peaceful within the context of my financial reality, and that I can move forward in my offerings or in the work I'm doing, not from this desperate, oh my God, I need this money, which I've been in that place a lot. And truthfully, if we're being really honest, Jacob, I have been much more financially abundant in my life than I am right now. Like, I wouldn't look at my life and say I'm living in financial abundance, but I'm living in a much more peaceful relationship to where I am financially, and also to the belief that when I connect myself and align myself with source, the power within me to create more financial abundance is greater than ever, even if that's not the reality I'm living right now. So I
Yeah.
just said a whole heap of stuff there, and I'll put it back on you.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you did, because when I want to invite, I loved that you invited people who have a little bit of trouble with the idea of God or source or something like that, and kind of get over it, or at least follow along. And I just want to say that Scott and I, if you haven't followed other episodes, I'll just say that we are open and skeptical humans. That's one thing I love about working with you, Scott, is that I know that you're not just going to swallow a belief or an idea whole and not examine it. And so this is not to say that you have to use the words God or source or anything like that. In addition, I would love it if you would like to unwind the issue of scarcity in your life, but just sometimes start hearing about these things, about manifestation, about shifting energy, and just it makes you want to recoil. I want to invite you to follow along, because what we're talking about is real time, field tested. Like, we're going to tell some stories today that I'm really excited about. And this is coming from the place of, in my experience, Scott, working a lot of really old scarcity knots, that who knows, maybe I came in with some before I was even born, but certainly from my earliest childhood and infancy, beliefs got implanted into my psyche while the cement was still wet, before I knew my own name. And then my experience of life was lived in an early framework of, there's not enough. There's not enough money. There's not enough time. There's not enough attention for you. Being the oldest of 6 kids, was interesting, because that, when you look at what develops in us, that then it eventually produces a personality or a persona. It's interesting, even birth order can affect our experience of that. So for example, I was the only child for a year, almost 2 years. Then my brother came along, and then very quickly 2 more kids came along. So I went from having an abundance of attention and regard for my mother to needing to be a caregiver alongside of her, and really feeling responsible for my family. And so I began to have a scarcity of space for myself,
Mm-hmm.
a scarcity of attention from my primary caregiver. And those were not things that I looked at as bad, and I don't look at them now with all this pain. It was just, I had to become aware of how much scarcity had begun to impact the way I saw the world, and not in just the money areas, like learning to take up space for myself and go, I have all the time that I need. In the past, felt like my time I owed it to everyone around me, my kids, my partner, the people at work. And so I was usually the last person on the list to ever get any of my time. And, financial gurus will say, pay yourself first. What they mean is, put money in your savings account before you pay all the rest of your bills. They say,
Yeah.
if you don't do that, then you're last. Well, in the more psychological, emotional arenas, I didn't know how to pay myself first. So, Scott, it took me a long time to learn to take first thing in the morning, sit down with a journal and take half an hour and then meditate. I felt selfish. It felt illegitimate. And it took me a while to erode the sense of scarcity, of there won't be enough time. If I don't sacrifice every possible minute and then leave myself to last, there won't be any time for all these important other responsibilities I have. So I just wanted to demonstrate there's more we're talking about here than just money. It's all connected.
Yeah. So how did you do it? How did you move from that scarcity mentality? What shifts did you make? How are you in the place you're in right now? And what place are you in right now?
Well, right this minute, I'm in a place of amazement, of gratitude, of uh, curiosity for how much more, and not just more money, but how in how many more areas of my life I can begin to apply these principles and experience the tremendous joy of them. And I just want to say that it started for me before this little book that I'm getting ready to hold up, and we'll make sure that this is in the show notes. But this book came along earlier this year at a perfect time. I think it really started
Say
for
the
me.
title. Sorry.
Yeah, I will in just a minute.
Oh, okay.
Um, this started for me. I know if I do that, I'll start talking about this little book, and I
Okay.
need to say a couple things first. Um, no, it started for me years ago when I began to notice how tightly I was wound, how dark my imagination was for my life. I felt like I was running out of time. I was in my, early mid 40s. My energy was low. I felt stressed and stretched all the time, not just financially, but just with everything. And I did not have an outlook on my life that said I'm excited about the next 10 years. It was scary for me. And I'd wake up a lot of times at 2 a.m. and just lie there and go, will I ever regain what I need to finish the things that matter to me in this life, And so during that period of time, that was when I really started to study and do the inner work of trauma healing. That's when I really developed a daily practice of meditation and journaling and walking, things like that. And so I would say that's when it started, and then it's sort of narrowed its focus in the last couple of years because, as I said, I think on a different episode, when I quit my job and it knew it was time to launch my ventures, I took this little sabbatical and went up to this beautiful cabin in the mountains. Sometimes I need to take you there. And Scott, my guide said, "You have to forgive money. You
Mm-hmm.
have to forgive money."
Yeah.
And that began this process of really going, okay, why am I holding money as an enemy or something that's so poisonous? And I was able to get to some of those beliefs. It's like, yeah, this was how I was raised. It was also my experience of it, in other enterprises. And so then this last year, June, Dr. Stephen Farmer came up and visited me, and we were driving around, same cabin, by the way. We were driving around talking, and he was sharing some of the things that had really made a difference for him. And so this book, now I'll say the title, the Abundance Book by John Randolph Price. And I think I said on the episode that did not fully record, Scott, this book would be the last book I would have ever chosen on Amazon to purchase ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Like cheesy, corny, ridiculous.
All of it, the title, the cover, the whole
Cover,
thing.
all
It's
of
like,
it. Yes.
absolutely not.
Yes. I feel you. I feel
All
you.
right, so now I'm going to bounce it to you because I started doing that practice. Today it was 120, day 123. So I'm a remedial student, Scott. So I have to learn things over and over again. So it's a 40-day practice, but I've been through it several times. I'm going to keep going. All right, so I sent you a copy, or encouraged you to have a copy, whichever it was, whenever it was ago, and you started doing it. So why don't you tell us about the book and what your experience of it is so far?
Yeah. I mean, the book is basically there are 10 statements that you are supposed to sit with each of those 10 statements for four separate times. So over 40 days, you've sat with each statement. Am I explaining that right? You've sat
Mm-hmm.
with each statement 4 times over 40 days. I write it in my journal, then you meditate on it for at least 15 minutes, and then you write down notes afterwards. The statements are all very energetically similar, and even the wording of some of the statements are very similar. And the essence of the statements, it's very aligned with what I believe to be true, which is that money is not the supply. People are not the supply. Experiences aren't the supply. The supply comes from your understanding of your inherent alignment with source, with spirit, with the energy that creates worlds. And
Yeah.
so for me, I do this in the morning. I'm on day 25, and I feel like this is so much of what I'm living into in my life anyway. It's one of the things I give most most energy toward is just align with spirit, and trust in that alignment, how your life unfolds. And what I see time and again is that when I am, and for me, when I say align with spirit, what that looks like, it looks like a couple things. One, it looks like connecting to my heart, which is where all the love lives, and being connected to love. And it looks like connecting with my soul, which for me is where my deepest stillness lives, where just absolute peace lives, the witness, essentially. So when I'm connecting to those energies, I really believe, or when you're connecting to those energies, I really believe that we can trust in what unfolds from that place. So, what nudges do you get when you're speaking to source? And Jacob brings up, I think you do, or maybe it's Lee, because Lee always brings this up, and I do this in my life, like writing exercise that you literally just say, "Dear soul, what will you have me know today? What do you need me to know?" And because when we're in that connection, when we're in that alignment, we get nudges from that place that direct us in very different ways than when we're solely locked into our mind and our ego and our fear and our insecurity. So when you're taking the time to be present with that heart center, that soul center, what guidance is it giving you? What direction is it sharing with you? And I think how this whole conversation started last week, Jacob, is I was bringing up that I have watched your journey with the Institute for Creative Living and Heal Plus Create, and I've seen it unfold in such an easy, natural way, which is not to say you haven't been working your butt off. You have. And at the same time, what you've managed to create in such a short amount of time from actually launching the Institute and actually offering these events, it's like they're exploding. And for me, the reason I believe it's happening is not just because you're working really hard at it, but because you are in alignment. You
Yes.
are connected to your relationship with spirit. You're clear about what you want to offer. And because of your connection, you have faith in what you're offering. You know it to be good and true and worthwhile, not only to yourself, but to others. So that the hard work alone, I think hard work alone gets people places, absolutely,
Mm-hmm.
but not in the way that I feel like it's unfolding as it is for you. Because you even told me that you're working 12-hour days and it's not really feeling like work. Yeah, you're tired by the end of a day, but you're also energized because you're just functioning in such clear alignment right now, and it's really beautiful to witness
Oh,
because you're also reaping the rewards of it.
yeah. Thank you. Wow. Hmm.
And that for me is the practice of abundance. That's abundance in action.
Thank you. And I love hearing how it looks from the outside or
You're
feels,
like, as
thank
I'm
you.
miserable on the end.
No, I mean, you just told the truth. I am working really hard, but Scott, here's something that was really beginning to settle in with me several years ago, and I felt called to begin practicing it, experimenting with it, more and more and more, because ever since I was a child, I would hear. I was hearing Dr. Zach Bush the other day on a podcast, and he was raised in a similar environment that I was, and he's like, I look back at when we were hanging out at church, and he's like, there was some amazing information that we kept passing over, and that was one of my earliest questions that eventually was one of the ones that led me out of Christianity. Was I went to my dad and said, hey, in the Bible it says, Jesus says, greater works than these, and he was talking about these miracles that people were so amazed by. Greater works than these shall you do. Like, don't, this isn't just me, this is our natural state. When you're aligned with natural law, these are the things that can happen. And I remember going to my dad, who was a theologian and brilliant mind, and I said, hey, what about this? Like, is this true? Because I mean, that if that's true, then we got a lot of cool stuff to work on here. And it freaked him the fuck out, and it freaked out any of the other people in leadership in that group. And I wasn't looking to be a dissenter, Scott. It was just like, wait a minute, if an enlightened master or avatar says that this is possible for everyone, if we're willing to learn how to align with natural law, those are newer words for me. But if that's possible, then why wouldn't we want to figure that out? And so what you described as the difference between the hustle grind culture, the grind 25/8,
Yeah.
I'm just grinding, always grinding. Well, the truth is I probably am grinding right now, but it doesn't feel like a grind. And here's the difference. If we're in a Newtonian model of life, meaning this is the exact number of foot-pounds per second that need to be exerted to move something from one place to another, that's just one example of it. But the laws of gravity and all these things in the Newtonian framework, it's all very mechanical and you don't have much leverage. So if you want a result, that means you've got to be willing to push one-to-one effort to make that happen. What happens when you begin to align with many of the things you've talked about from Abraham Hicks and all the ancient masters, when we begin to align with those things and begin to erode the barriers within ourselves that would say those are impossible, I
Yes.
feel strongly that we begin to then access a higher order of law. And if we use law, of course, this is a mess right now, but in the past, federal law always supersedes state law. So at least that's the system that we're in. So, but that's an easy way to understand what I'm talking about here. So state law is this. Here's the federal law. And if you can access the higher order of law, you can actually use that principle to act upon the lower orders. So what happens when we get into these alignments that you're describing, Scott, is that we actually gain leverage so that the work we're doing, it's not one-to-one anymore. It's I'm doing this work, but oh my God, I can't believe how much more result is coming from that, right?
Absolutely. And I in my own life, I would say that I have experienced what you're referring to the most profoundly in terms of self-love.
Hmm.
Like I look at the work I've done on loving myself and the practice I've put in and the intention I've put in, and the dividends have been so far beyond I think what I could even imagine when I
Yeah.
consider the relationship I have with myself right now. Because if you only consider that the energy that created everything, and you look at the everything and you look at how miraculous the everything is, you look at the natural world and what's happening in the natural world, you look at our bodies and what's happening in our bodies. And for me, I have to acknowledge the miraculous nature of it and the limitless nature of it.
Yeah.
And that is the energy swirling within us. So then when I acknowledge the miraculous, limitless nature that exists in nature, in the trees, in the oceans, and understand that that exists within myself as well, I feel absolutely inclined to be incredibly intentional in connecting to that energy within me and acknowledging the limitlessness of it. So when I am feeling limited, when I am feeling held back, when I am feeling like I can't possibly make this thing happen in my life, I know that I'm out of alignment. I
Yes.
know that I'm working with the state law that you referred to, and that's a law that is confined to our minds, confined to our brains.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know, I know that everyone listening and everyone on the planet, we have all experienced miracles just in existing and looking around at how fucking nuts stuff is. If you just look at ants, if you just look at an anthill and what's happening there, and then actually learn about what's happening there, it blows your mind, right? And like this is so. I don't think I know Jacob and I aren't speaking to when Jacob's referring to natural law and higher orders and things like that. We're not referring to anything that either one of us believes is woo woo or is ungrounded.
Mm-mm.
I feel that what you're referring to is what is most innate in us, and
Mm-hmm.
we have lost touch with it, and we have come to learn, and we have been conditioned to believe that we are bound to these state laws that are so limited,
Right.
when the truth of who we are is so much bigger than that. So we're just really speaking to getting in touch with that, feeling into that more, acknowledging it more, praying to it more, inviting that energy to become bigger in our lives, and seeing from that place what we can create.
I want to invite anyone who immediately freezes up about money, that
Mhm.
one thing, money, because that is such a powerful energy center in our world. When you think about the major energy centers, Scott, so sex, love, money, food. Um, those are some of the biggest ones. And when you think about the energy that the a sense of scarcity that surrounds a lot of those things,
Yeah.
it's the scarcity. It's our ideas of scarcity about money, about sex, about food, for example. Whether it's whatever our distortion is in seeing there being plenty. Well, if there's enough, then why would I ever be afraid? Why would I be insecure? Why would I need to hoard it or
Mhm.
eat too much of it or play games to get it in the case of sex, or use weird power struggles to get it or something like that. So whenever I think about scarcity, it's usually around something important that's a big power source. Otherwise, there's no charge in it, so we wouldn't care. But I want to invite anybody who tends to lock up about the power center of money, and anytime you hear these principles being talked about, it just feels so either gross or impossible or something when it's relating to money. And some of that existed in me for sure, Scott. Growing up the way I did, my father grew up in poverty and tremendous poverty. My mother grew up much more comfortably, and there was quite a bit of family money on her side. So that part of it wasn't coming from her specifically, at least not the money is evil. That mantra came very strongly through my dad, and he was frustrated with his inability to provide for the family and to have finances be easy. And he was carrying on the narrative that had been handed to him as a child. Um, but I stood in lines for government cheese and peanut butter and things like that as a kid. And I don't say that as a bad thing. I kind of am glad that I had that experience. We were never hungry. I never was truly food insecure. And I know plenty of people have been or are. But I did experience, like every bit of scarcity down to the level of not having any food, certainly experienced that. And so deep in my psyche was this idea that money is bad. There's not enough of it. And if you have enough, you're probably going to hurt other people either to get it or to keep it. So I would invite anyone who maybe has some version of those beliefs, in there or feelings about it. And so it's just hard when you hear, manifest more abundance financially. It's just hard to even just kind of gets locked up. The very first principle in the abundance book is, let me set the scene. So Dr. Stephen Farmer and I are driving through the Sawtooth Mountains, Scott, and it's one of my favorite places on earth. I've not traveled the whole world, but I've traveled enough to know this is a very special place. It's alpine, giant granite peaks, beautiful lakes. It's just beautiful. And we were driving through that, and then I got the book, and my girlfriend and I went back up there to that same spot a few weeks later, and we were driving. We were talking about the book, and we pulled over beside the road, and there's this great big meadow surrounded by these fir trees and pine trees. And this meadow, it looked like there was a lake in it, but it wasn't. It was camas flowers. They were blue. There was the sheen of blue and Indian paintbrush, the red spotted in there.
Mm.
And there was this creek running through it. And it's so clean and clear. I'm a little bit of a wild person, but in some cases I'm willing to just drink right out of a creek. I got on my belly and drank right out of this creek, and it was so clear.
Oh my God.
And I stood up, and I had water falling off my face in the sunshine. And Rachel came and stood there. We were looking out at all of this abundance. And the very first principle in the book is God is lavish, unfailing abundance, the rich, omnipresent substance of the universe. This, I can't believe I forgot it.
You had it. I'm like, look at him.
God is lavish, unfailing abundance, the rich, omnipresent substance of the universe. This all-providing source of infinite prosperity is individualized as me, the
Yes.
reality of me. And as I stood there in that meadow under this blue sky, feeling loved, feeling like really emotional, that nature often I just get back in touch with my feelings and emotions. And standing there, I was surrounded by rich, omnipresent abundance everywhere in the natural world. There's flowers, there's grass, there's sunshine, there's rain, there's all this stuff. And it's like, and the guides were like, this is what we're talking about.
Mhm.
You keep going strictly to money. We want you to understand that the rich, omnipresent substance of the universe, you're made of it. The tree that you're looking at is made of it. The cat over there, everything you're looking at is made of the substance of the everything.
Yeah.
And it is meant to be. When it's in balance, when it's aligned, it is abundant. It is naturally, but there's naturally enough.
And everything fuels everything else. Like for me, when you were speaking earlier, I was thinking it's not just our relationship with money and you needing to stop hating money and me working to do the same thing, essentially, like to stop feeling like money is evil. And even more so for me, money is not spiritual.
Right.
And if I'm thinking about money, I'm not spiritual, all these stories. But for me, part of this practice with the abundance book and with abundance in general and with living is about being intentional about creating good feeling within myself as often as possible. So if you're somebody who is single and wanting to be in a relationship with a man, let's say, but part of the repetitive story that you're playing over is that men suck, men are assholes, men are this, men are that. And that's the energy with which you're moving through the world of being single. You are not serving yourself in any positive way, which isn't to say that men can't be assholes and all of those things,
Sure.
but especially if you're seeking the company, the romantic presence of a man in your life, how does it serve you to be moving into that with that energy? And not only how does it serve you actually attracting a relationship, but how does it serve you in your life right
Mhm.
now to be holding a story about men that only puts you in an animus relationship with men? It
Right.
doesn't serve you. So I'm constantly considering, how does this thought, how is it making me feel right now? So
Mhm.
in terms of money, I've had so many stories about money, and now I'm really being so intentional in my life when I'm spending money and paying bills, being grateful. Not like, oh crap, that's however many hundreds of dollars for my car payment, but oh my God, what a blessing to be able to pay for my car in this way. Like all the time considering, how can I be in good relationship with money? How
Right.
can I be in good relationship with my creativity when I'm feeling wildly stuck and like there's nothing left to write? Like, how is it serving me to actually be holding on to that belief in the moment when I don't need to be? Why not tell myself another story like, look at all you've written in your life, look at all you've created in your life. Of course, you have more creativity in you. Creativity is boundless. Look at the creativity of nature around us. You
Right.
can't be limited in your creativity if there's no such thing as limited creativity, right? So, how can we be telling ourselves different stories? For me, it's more than anything often for the primary purpose of changing my reality in the moment to a
Mm.
better feeling reality. And that I feel is ultimately what we're doing. And then the gift of that is, by changing your reality in the moment, you're automatically creating for yourself a better chance of manifesting, magnetizing what it is you want to create. That's the nature of energy.
Yes.
So it's a win-win-win-win-win.
Just all the wins. And I love that you described it that way, Scott, because what I am noticing more and more, and of course, I didn't just suddenly have this satori moment and come up with this stuff. All of the ancients have said this forever,
Yeah,
and
forever.
that's why I want to bring more focus to it right now, because everyone listening, you've already heard this stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't want to let it just slide through as, yeah, I've heard that, it's an inside job. Let's bring focus of that. Whatever is happening in my own inner reality is reflected in my outer reality, which is so interesting. And people go, well, what about a Donald Trump who has a billion or whatever, some version of a lot of money? We don't know exactly how much, and he's, but he's got gold plated toilets and private jets and stuff. But how could his inner world, how could that be a reflection? That's a good question, and I wouldn't say that I have the total answer to it, but I will say that it is possible to bring into being, to manifest a tremendous amount of one power, of one energy, money, and be completely broke in every other way in your life.
Mhm.
And Scott, Abraham Hicks talks about, if humans realized, and you probably will be able to actually say this better because you've spent more time with their material, if humans realized how powerful they are and how powerful their inner state is, they said if you can get to where you're in this true state of the fulfillment of that wish, that dream, that hope, if you can be in the energy of that feeling and you can hold it for 90 seconds, you will be surprised at how quickly it can show up in your life. They said the trouble is we get so distracted. Our left brain thing, minds and egos are in there telling stories. So after 12 seconds or 35 seconds, and it's not to say it won't ever happen until you get perfectly, you can hold it for 90 seconds, but I've begun to use that. And back to the point you were just making about how does this thought make me feel? How does this belief make me feel? And we've heard our teachers, many of them say, Scott, if you knew how powerful you were, you would not abide the presence of a single negative thought because of how powerfully creative that is in your world. And that gets a little bit intimidating to me because I have plenty of negative thoughts every single day.
Yeah.
But when I use that as more of a practice and say, okay, the more times a day I notice that I'm feeling low, pissed, contracted, afraid, look at what thoughts that I'm having or allowing when that's happening. Because if I can spend more of the time, and I've watched this happen, and to me it's a gradient line, if I look at my day and more of my day is spent doom scrolling, being pissed about politics or the economy, feeling dumpy, if 56% of my day is spent there, if I notice the results that I got from that day at the end of the day, the likelihood is it was not as wonderful a day as I would have loved in terms of producing things I cared about or experiencing things. The more that I am able to shift that even a degree at a time, and I feel like this is important because some people are like, I've been in such a dark place for so long to even get even sort of better, much less, living in this high space all the time is too much to ask. And it is too much to ask. But if we can move it even a degree at a time, just begin to notice, oh, there's my unconscious river of thought just sweeping me along, and it's negative. What if I were to shift, just because we have that power, to
Yeah.
shift my attention a little bit more toward what would I love to create? What would I love to experience? How would I love to feel right now?
It's so important what you're saying because like if you're somebody out there who is really stressed financially, let's say, let's make this very practical.
Yeah.
You don't know how you're going to pay your rent, and these are very, stressful concerns. And at the same time, they're very stressful concerns to your mind.
Mhm.
There, what I believe, this is, I speak as somebody at one point in my life, I was $50,000 in credit card debt. I
Mhm.
spent many years living paycheck to paycheck. I've never been food insecure either, so I can't relate to that. Truly, not
Mhm.
feeling like I was going to have my next meal.
Mhm.
But I can relate to being stressed out by money to certain degrees.
Sure.
And it's like we are not bound to the anxiety that we believe in naturally comes with financial stresses. Our mind is bound to that anxiety, but there is a place within us that actually is at peace, that actually does believe we're going to be okay no matter what. And so really what I feel like you're speaking to, Jacob, and what we're speaking to is that instead of believing that you have to be completely freaked out by your financial state, even if it's scary,
Mhm.
what about giving energy to what it is you want to create in your life, giving energy, even just to the thoughts of it, even just to journaling about it. Because
Mhm.
at the very least, what you're doing is you're giving 10 or 15 or 20 minutes to something that actually has a creative, vital, energetic life force to it that actually does stand to create the possibility of more of what you seek rather than giving those 20 minutes just to being stressed out. And this for me is when I'm speaking to how do we create more of that good feeling?
Mhm.
You can have low finances and still be living in a relatively peaceful way. That is possible. And I know it's possible because I have experienced it at moments in my life. And I'm experiencing it this moment in my life where I'm not as financially abundant as would be ideal, but I'm feeling really peaceful,
Yeah.
and it's because I'm putting energy into creating that while at the same time, well, what offerings am I going to create? And I know we talked a little. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it
Oh yeah.
I know it does to you. It's not. This isn't coming from a It's not coming from denial either. It's not coming from pretending that your bills don't exist or pretending that you have more money in your account. It's coming from an understanding that stress is not inherent in us.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's a process our mind goes through, but we can also create peace even when we're feeling more scarce. And why wouldn't we put energy into creating that?
Yeah, and let's stay practical here because
Yeah.
I love. Well, I mean, I'm just glad you took the turn back here because I feel like it's so important, and I don't want to. I don't, Scott. That's ever since I left the religion of my childhood, and then went through a couple of other experiences that got pretty dogmatic and like very controlling and limiting. Um, at some point along the way, I said, I will not swallow anyone else's belief system.
Mhm.
If they say I believe, or if I say I believe, it's not. I'm not angry about that. That's always a little alert flag for me. If I say I believe something, my next internal question is, can I experience it? Is it possible for me to move beyond just a belief and into an actual experience where it becomes internalized?
Yeah.
And by the way, there's nothing wrong with beliefs. I think unquestioned beliefs, unexamined, untested beliefs are become a real problem in our world. I think that we see a lot of that, just people just believing it without actually living into it,
Mhm.
internalizing it.
Yeah.
But I just want to share, before this book came into my world, and I shared it with you and some others. Early this year, I was sitting in a coffee shop and I was facing a year that was, a blank slate for creation, but I was feeling intimidated by it because I had already spent a year without a steady paycheck, and some good things were happening, but I was not exactly sure. And I had enough. I had enough money to pay my bills. I had enough on hand, but my mind was telling these stories like, oh my God. And then this bad thing will happen and this won't work out. And pretty soon taxes are due and, your car needs to be repaired. All these things stacked up to where it looked so much bigger than the possibilities. And I was sitting in this coffee shop and I was entering the space you're talking about of feeling grateful and of noticing that I have enough, that I am enough, that I'm being provided for all around me all the time. So telling myself the truth was such an important thing. It's like my mind was stacking all of this other stuff. And it's like, yes. And the truth of this moment is I have plenty. Truth of this moment is I'm sitting in a warm coffee shop and I have Wi-Fi and I just had a wonderful coffee. And when I get in my car, there's more than half a tank of gas in it. And by the way, there's money in my bank account. And I was sitting there and I was just feeling so grateful and placing out in my journal, that's my version of prayer often, of I really would love to see some additional money show up. And it wasn't 5 minutes later that I get a text from somebody very close to me, and they had just had some amazing financial things happen. And they said, I don't know why, but I just feel very impressed to give you 6 months worth of rent, whatever your house payment is. I just feel like that's something I want to do. It would bring me joy. And I just started weeping, in my corner of the coffee shop because it was like such a quick
My goodness.
answer. And, that actually did make a difference, Scott. I would have had enough money to pay my rent the whole rest of those months, but it made a difference. And I was sitting there in my journal, I mean, unreadable, like, oh my God, I can't believe this just happened. This is amazing. And the guides came along and said, I mean, of course, the energy of your gratitude is beautiful. Um, and you need to quit holding what you consider to be a big miracle apart from the rest of your life. They said, any small anxiety you have, anytime you run up against the fear of something being scarce, I'm not going to have enough time or money, that's your signal to ask for a miracle, to step into the space of what would I love rather than this fear. They're like, A Course in Miracles, one of the very first things says there is no order of difficulty in miracles. All expressions of love are maximal.
Mhm.
And they're like, we want you to live more and more that life.
Yeah.
And yes, it's weird. And yes, it does not follow linear step-by-step processes often. But if you're willing to do it, you can have such a greater experience of things coming into your life that you can then share with others. And you can be supported deeply as you are living a life that you love and that you know is meant to also be healthy and good for the people you're connected to. And Scott, this year has been just one series of, and I'm trying not to use the word big and small miracles anymore, but still, to my mind, it's like, holy shit, how did all of those things happen inside of a single year? Which goes back to what you mentioned earlier about what appears to be such rapid speed of unfolding. And I feel like your point of alignment cannot be understated, or overstated. It's so crucial. It's so crucial to find out, what have I been holding as a desire or as a ambition that doesn't actually feel all that good? And I think that's one of the simplest measures of, is it aligned or isn't it? Because
Yeah.
there are two forces, and they feel similar. One is stress and one is tension. Stress to me means something in the system is out of alignment.
Mhm.
Tension is like what happens when you're going 90 miles an hour down the freeway in a car that can handle it with good tires and good engine. There's tension on the system, but it's nothing's falling apart. You can do it for 8 hours straight. And tension is actually required as part of the creative process. It's, we don't, when you pull back the bowstring, that creates potential energy, but there's an experience of tension in that. If it's out of alignment, the arrow is going to go all wobbly. And if there's no tension, the arrow can't go anywhere. So
Right.
learning to be comfortable with the experience of tension, but if it's in alignment, then that has great power, and it can actually meet the mark that it's looking to find.
Yeah, and you're so right when you say it's actually very clear. Like, when you're feeling aligned or not. You know when your choices are aligned or not, really based on how you feel. It's almost always obvious. And I kept feeling the word receiving as you were talking as well, because for me, part of abundance and allowing for abundance in our lives in different areas is really needing to have a willingness to receive it. Like break down that wall that doesn't allow you to receive. And I've looked at that in my life, and I think
Yeah,
I've certainly looked at it financially, the blocks I've put up to actually receiving, and that all comes back to scarcity or belief in my worth. Am I enough? All those stories. But I
right.
know that a lot of us do that with relationships too.
Yeah,
We want to be in a relationship with someone, but we don't really allow ourselves to receive the love that we are seeking because of some part of us that believes maybe we're not worthy of it and what we have to give is not enough. And so for me, the gift of alignment and why we keep coming back to it is because Jacob and I both know that in that place there is no scarcity. And
right.
so if you're out there thinking, well, how the hell do you get aligned? I am more often not aligned than I am aligned, to be very clear. But
Mhm.
for me, that practice looks like, first of all, just acknowledging again and again my deep belief, and for me it's actually a deep knowing, that the energy that created all things is an energy that's alive within me. It
Right.
is boundless, it is all abundant, it is all loving, it is all creative. All of
Mm.
those things exist within me. So for me, all throughout the day at different points, I'm reminding myself of that. And I'm actually praying to that energy. Please show up in my life in a bigger way. Please
Mm.
help me find my way to you in a more aligned way, in a clearer way. And when I am feeling in that alignment, I give myself over to it as much as possible, because even a handful of minutes in that place, I believe, serves profoundly, right? And it allows us to come back to that place again and again and again.
Right. Yeah, and I wanted to say, Scott, too, one of the other principles in this book, I just love every time I come to this one. This was the one that Stephen Farmer could remember after having done it years and years and years before.
Uh-huh.
And it's interesting. It's the one that sticks out the most for me. Um, Even though each of them has its own very, as you say, many of them are similar. But this one I love because it's direct and it's potent. Money is not my supply.
Yes.
You mentioned this one earlier. Money is not my supply. And oh my God, even that one phrase, when I was sitting with this, when I first got it, and this was ahead of creating this, um, writers retreat with Anne Lamott and Julia and Sark and all these amazing teachers and people who have showed up. And I could not, it was hard for me to even imagine how all of these things would come together and be possible. And the guides, so as I was imagining that, putting the pieces together, and then feeling the fear of being on the hook for really large amounts of money to put something like that together before any tickets sell at all. The guides came along and said, listen, you still have a belief that money is your supply, because you're waiting till you feel okay about this until you've actually collected enough of the money in the bank to be okay. And at that point, you're going to be like, oh yeah, see, this stuff works. But they're like, but that means that money still is your supply.
Yeah.
So they're like, what we want you to do is practice right this minute before the money's in your account to make you believe that you're okay, to practice being okay right now. So
Yes.
money is not my supply. No person, place, or condition is my supply. And, I have friends who are going through divorces right now, and they're dealing with, oh my God, my main source of income is now leaving with this person. And it's right that this divorce is happening, but what am I going to do? I'm so afraid, or I hate where I live and I know it's time for me to move across the country, but I have no idea. Da, 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 da. That's a person, a place, or a condition. Being the main supply, being the enoughness. So money is not my supply. No person, place, or condition is my supply. My awareness, understanding, and knowledge of the all-providing activity of the divine mind within me is my supply. And these are easy to kind of flow through, but every time I sit with it a long time and actually start feeling it, it's like, okay, that's a real shift in how to live life. And my
Absolutely.
consciousness of this truth is unlimited. Therefore, my supply is unlimited. And my God, Scott, it's so interesting. Easier and easier now after 123 days of really specifically focusing on these things and allowing them to settle in. But especially at first, and anyone who wants to test this, experiment with this with us, I just want you to hear this, that my mind rebelled so hard against some of those principles. Like, it's like I wanted to accept it and begin to practice it,
Yeah.
internalize it. My mind was in there going, oh, this is such bullshit. But that's the old voice of the oppressor. That's the old voice of those beliefs that had kept me locked into a single kind of experience,
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And as you were talking, I was thinking about Abraham Hicks, because one of the things they say often is everything we desire because we believe that the having of it is going to create something good in our lives. So, and they also say humans are so focused on what's in front of them. So instead of what's possible. So, and this comes back again to, like, if you only have $10 in your bank account, it's hard to not focus on that, but it's not impossible. And so knowing that everything we desire because we believe that having it is going to make us feel good. For me, my practice constantly is, I want to feel good right now. So how can I bring myself to that good feeling without even having the thing I desire yet? And part of that for me is the practice of visualization, like living into the experience that I want to create for myself, but living into it now as though it exists, and then therefore giving not from a woo-woo place, from a place of understanding that giving myself the experience of living into what I want to create creates for me in this moment a great feeling. And suddenly I'm feeling great. Even though I don't have the thing yet, I'm feeling great right now, which is what we all want, to feel good now. Right. So for me, these practices are so powerful. And then, of course, they naturally, I believe, create a greater possibility of manifesting what it is I want to create, because I'm living into it energetically right now. It's all energy. It's momentum.
It totally is, Scott. And, I love Dr. Joe Dispenza's discussion on creating future memory. He's like, most of us living so much from past memory.
Yes.
And he's like, that's only one function of our mind. Like, we totally have this power of transporting ourselves into a different situation in our imagination and experiencing it, but not just experiencing it as some sort of visual, like getting clear in it to the point where it becomes a reality in our nervous system, so that our bodies and brains are literally producing the neurochemicals and the
Yes.
chemicals in our nervous system that we are experiencing that state. And he
Yes.
said the only reason most of us don't do that is because we're afraid, because we don't have much experience with that. So we rely on past experience of hurt, disappointment, rejection, failure, loss, lack, all those things, and we keep trying to create a future that we desire from that framework. And he's like, those chemicals are just flowing through your brain and your body, and you keep experiencing lack while you're trying to visualize abundance. So he said, don't beat yourself up about that, but let's just take a recess and create moments where we do move forward and create a future memory. And that was one of the things that has helped me this summer, that was full of tension. Really a lot of work and effort and organizing and things for this writers retreat. But Scott, early in the summer, before we had even had contracts signed, before we had started selling any tickets, the guides came along. It's like, what's a symbolic snapshot of a moment for you that will help you get into the feeling of this is the desired result? And so I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay. So it was standing on stage with Anne Lamott, introducing her, and we had our arms around each other, and everyone was ready to hear from Anne. And it was this moment of accomplishment. She's the last speaker in this event we're doing. There was this moment of accomplishment of this all came together. It all worked.
Yeah.
And you know what? There wasn't any thought of money in that moment. What it was this worked, and we're serving the people, and they showed up, and I could see tears on people's faces as they were, getting ready to listen to Anne, and you could tell that they had connected with the things that were important to them. And so that little snapshot became this future memory that I kept going back to all summer long as I was, facing uncertainty. And is this one going to promote it? Are we going to, are we going to get the word out? All of that stuff. And I look at that and I wanted to tell that specific story because it is something that really made a difference. It actually not just carried me through moments that were, filled with tension or uncertainty, but it also kept me in the energy of, anytime there'd be a question, customers are sending in, can I get a refund, or, can I get a scholarship, any of these things. And of course I want to just be completely generous and work with everyone. Then there's also the financial reality of it. But staying in the energy of what is the feeling of this being accomplished? And it's not about me, it's about us experiencing something very special. And that would put me back in my body. That would let the tension and stress flow out of me. It's like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's why I'm doing this thing, is for that moment of love. And not just Anne Lamott. That just happened to be the symbol of it.
Yeah.
It was Anne, it was Julia, it was Sark, it was, Lawrence Apollo, all the different teachers, like this feeling of we did this, and we didn't do it just for our own glory or for our own financial gain. We did it because we care about this, and we love connecting people with their dreams, with their inner creative self, with their soul. So I just wanted to share that as something that has really been a major game changer for me this summer, in creating this. And also, there's still plenty of, in golfing world, they would say there's still plenty of green between you and the hole, and so, but I'm just, every time I have anxiety is like, okay, what if the technology doesn't work and we have 1,000 people out there around the world waiting, and they're like, keep focused on the result. It's all coming together around this inspired vision, this feeling.
Beautiful. I love that. It's a perfect example of what we're talking about. I'm kind of feeling like closing it out. What do you think?
I feel like I just talked for a long time, and I'd love to hear more from you, but yeah, we're probably about done. And
Yeah, I feel like we could do several episodes, honestly, on this subject. It's juicy, and it's something we're all dealing with.
yeah.
I
Well, and I feel like it's important, Scott, as we're many people, those listening, I suspect many of the people who like you and me and like what we're talking about are really seeking to shift into a life that works better for them, where money stress is not a big factor, or it goes away altogether, and where they're creating lives that feel like they're connected to a sense of purpose, a sense of service, a sense of joy and ease. And I just want to invite you, if that describes you in any way, I want to invite you to go deeper with us in this practice and send us a note through heyjacob@scott.com. We'll have to get in there and review what's been coming in, Scott. but it would mean a lot to me to not just talk about this in an episode or two, but to actually invite you into the practice and hear your own stories of it,
Absolutely. Yeah. We always welcome, your thoughts, your ideas, your questions, anything that you want to share with us. We love creating episodes built on your thoughts, ideas, and questions. So please share. And while we're saying that, also, it is very helpful to us if you leave reviews and ratings. It helps this podcast get seen by more people, especially on the Apple Podcast app. So if you feel you're benefiting from what we're talking about and you're enjoying yourself, takes a minute, literally, not even. And we would love that. So thank you for that too. And what do you have coming up? I know you have something big coming up. And are there still seats for it, or is it sold out?
We're just about sold out for in person, but we have plenty of seats left for the live broadcast around the world. So I'll make sure that's in the show notes. And I was just getting ready to ask you, what do you have coming up?
Yeah, well, I've got 3 breathwork things. Next week is going to be Wednesday and Thursday. I'm doing a Thursday during the day so that Europeans can come, because my timing for everything always is middle of the night. And
Yeah.
a few people have reached out to say, hey, we want to do this. But so I have a Wednesday evening, a Thursday afternoon, and then Sunday afternoon. I think it's at maybe 2 to 3:30 Mountain Time with you.
Okay.
Through the Heal Plus Create community. So 3 different breathwork journeys. We'll have links to all of them. And come, even if you're like, that I'm not interested in breathing. I was never interested in breathing either. Just come and see what it's all about, because your mind will be blown.
I love that you've done it enough times, Scott, to feel really confident. Hey, if you lie on your back, you don't have to even believe it. Just breathe with us.
Yeah. Yes.
Just breathe. You literally, something is going to happen for you.
You will have a trippy experience that you've probably never had in your life. And you'll come away from it remembering it, and hopefully with some interesting downloads. So.
Yeah, well, and the desire to do more of it and realize how simple. Like we always think we got to go to this special place, retreat. It's literally the closest thing to the autonomic nervous system. Means that you're breathing, your heart's beating, and if you can do those two things, you can experience these different states. It's brilliant.
And what about you? So tell us what's coming up.
Oh, well, the Writers Retreat.
Yeah, what's it called though? Like
Heal Plus Create Writers Retreat. Okay. It's in Marin, California. But we also spent the time and energy to make sure that it could be live broadcast around the world. And everybody who gets a ticket, whether it's in person or live broadcast, will have access. Sam Lamott is doing the audio and visual, so he's bringing his professional studio in. Beautiful. So we're going to have really high quality recordings that'll be available to everybody who has a ticket for a year. So they don't have to just show up and internalize it all. They can actually rewatch the things that call their name over and over again for a full year.
Awesome. And we'll have links to all this stuff.
Yeah.
In the notes. Cool, brother. Well, thank you. Thank you all for listening and being here with us on this journey.
I'm feeling somewhat hopeful that this one will actually get fully recorded and produced.
I hope so too. Because for those of you listening, 2 of the last 3 that we recorded were busts.
Yeah.
So, it was a little disheartening for sure.
Well, especially, I'm always happy to be here and offer some things. But, especially last week when Scott's audio and video got totally taken out, I'm like, well, that was the juicy stuff. I'm just here.
You're being humble now. Well, anyway, I love you, brother.
I love you too. Thanks for doing this, my friend.
Yeah, you too. All right.
We don't have to try any harder. We don't need to fight.